Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be discussing the 2010 film Just Right as suggested by these lovely subscribers here. So starting off, we have Leslie Wright. She's our main character and protagonist. And just a few things about Leslie. She's the chief physical therapist at her job. She loves basketball, and specifically she is a major Nets fan, like a super fan. And she also has trouble dating, and she often refers to herself as the home girl. Like she constantly is getting friend zoned by men. We get to see Leslie's dating life firsthand. She goes on a blind date, and the blind date seems to be going really, really well. She's vibing, he's vibing, they're laughing, they're engaged in conversation. At some point, he tells her to open wide and then proceeds to feed her some cake, like literally with his, like, not with his hand, but you know, like he's spoon feeding her cake. They're drinking, they're vibing, like it looks like a very successful date until the date concludes. Leslie and her date go outside to pick their car up from valet, and Leslie is making suggestions for their next date. She's like, we can go to the movies, we can go to a Nets game. The guy basically curves her, which honestly surprised the hell out of me because the date seemed like it was going so well. And he just says, like, after she suggests going to a Nets game, he's like, wow, like you're an amazing woman, and whoever ends up with you is going to be really lucky and happy. And we know that this happens to Leslie a lot because she's literally finishing his sentences as he's curving her, and so he'll be like, yes, like I just got out of it, and she'll be like, a really bad relationship. Like she's like finishing his sentences. So apparently she gets curved a lot, and you can tell she's a little disappointed that this is the direction that the date has gone, which, you know, disappointment is expected and it's normal. The feeling of disappointment is always okay as long as it's not immediately followed by being an asshole and crashing out. She was a champ about it and she took it very well. And I will say too that the fact that he wasn't interested in having a relationship with her and communicated that was really dope. And the fact that he was still engaged in their date and wasn't just like on his phone the whole time or just like, I gotta get up out of here. Like he actually sat and participated in the date and was respectful and kind enough to tell her that he wasn't interested. So anyways, Leslie goes home after her date, and then we get to meet Morgan, her god sister. They briefly debrief her date, and Leslie says, oh yes, it went well, but he thinks that I would make the perfect homegirl. And like I said, that's just like an ongoing thing with Leslie in her dating life, that she's like the perfect homegirl. Always the homegirl, never the girl at home. That didn't make any fucking sense. So a little bit about Leslie's god sister, Morgan. Morgan lives with Leslie, and she's kind of down bad. Like she had her BMW repossessed. She's unemployed, but she has goals and ambition. And her goal is to become a basketball wife. Swear to God. Leslie comes in, and after they debrief her date for like all of 2 seconds, Morgan has a whole dream board dedicated to finding a rich NBA player to marry, and she's studying NBA wives and how they have different brands, how they have fragrances and clothing lines. And so this is like her goal. She's unemployed. She doesn't want to find a job. This is what she wants to do. Morgan also happens to be conventionally attractive. And let me say this, Morgan is problematic, and not because she's conventionally attractive, but because she's just problematic. And the only reason I'm bringing up that she's conventionally attractive is because it's relative to the movie and her character. Don't get me wrong. I don't think that there's anything wrong with fantasizing about falling in love with a wealthy man and getting wined and dined. Like if you look at my 2017 Kindle and the books that were on there, it was riddled with that type of stuff. But for that to be her life's goal, that is a choice. That is a choice. And to each their own, you know what I mean? But I have found that it's nearly impossible to be friends or to be a girl's girl with girlies like this. Have you ever girl's girled too close to the sun and ended up supporting an asshole? So the next day, Leslie and Morgan go to a Nets game. So for context, Leslie's parents are always at her house, specifically her dad. Leslie bought like a fixer-upper of a home, so her dad is always there making repairs. Her mom is sometimes there too. So after getting ready to go to the game, Leslie runs into her mom in the hallway, and her mom is very disappointed in what Leslie is wearing to go to the basketball game. And the very first thing that Leslie's mom says to her when she sees her is, how are you gonna get a man dressed like that? And mind you, Leslie is dressed extremely appropriately for the occasion, which is a basketball game. She literally has on a Nets jersey and some jeans, and she looks very clearly presentable. And like I said, it's very appropriate for the occasion. At some point, Leslie's mom grabs Morgan, who is wearing a very nice dress. She has her hair curled, her hair is done, her makeup is done, she's wearing a pretty dress, and is telling Leslie that she needs to dress like Morgan in order to get a man. The fact that Morgan is wearing a dress to a basketball game, to each their own. You know, I'm not judging it. Wear whatever you want to wear. You know, we only have one life. I think you should wear whatever makes you feel good. I know girlies that, you know, they just like to dress up all the time. Like, that's just what they do. It usually has shit else to do with the man, but that's just what they like to do. We know Morgan, though. We know her intention is to find a rich husband, and we know she's trying to dress the part to find a rich husband, and I think that's what gives me the ick in this situation. And not only that, Leslie's mom kind of making Leslie feel bad for what she's wearing, which, like I said, is her outfit is completely appropriate for the occasion, is weird behavior. So we're at the game, and Leslie's having a good time watching the games. Like, she's really getting into it. She's like cheering, and she's really hype about it. And then you look over at Morgan, and Morgan is literally, she has binoculars watching the basketball wives section, looking at like their clothes and stuff. So she's locked into that, not even paying attention to the game at all. So the Nets win the game. The game has ended. As Leslie and Morgan are walking out, a group of Morgan's friends approaches them, and they're inviting Morgan out to a party where they think that they can get the hookup to get an invite to Scott McKnight's birthday party that weekend. So for context, Scott McKnight is like the MVP of the Nets. He's like the star player of the Nets, right? And so basically they're trying to seduce and scheme their way into getting an invite to his birthday party. That being said, Morgan ditches Leslie and goes off with her friends. Leslie goes on home. But before she goes home, she stops at a gas station. She's there getting her gas pumped, and guess who pulls up at the pump across the way? It's Scott McKnight. So she sees Scott get out of his car, and he's on the phone talking about a charity event, and he's struggling trying to find the gas tank so he can get some gas. And so she goes over to help him, and she basically shows him where to open it. He's like, oh, thank you. And then she notices that he has a jazz CD on his dash, and they talk about jazz for a little bit. So that's something that they have in common. And so she goes off to her car, and he's like, oh, well, let me open the door for you. So he goes to open the door, and he struggles a little bit because Leslie drives a hoopty, as one would call it. And so the door is a little jammed. So he like struggles opening it. The car's name is Eleanor. There's a whole lore behind that we'll get into later. And so he's about to leave, but then he stops and then invites her to his birthday party. And in real life, that could mean anything. But in rom-com, that means he literally wants to drink her bathwater and dedicate his whole life to her. The next day, Leslie is chatting it up with Morgan. Morgan didn't get an invite to Scott's party, but Leslie did, and invites Morgan to be her +1. So Leslie explains to Morgan how she got the invite, and she's kind of like gushing over Scott and talking about how he was really nice and how he was such a gentleman and a sweetheart. And Morgan says something on the lines of like, you're not into him, are you? And it's like, why wouldn't she be into him? She just said that he was like a total gentleman and a really nice guy. And she was asking the wrong question. She should have been like, is he into you, huh? Because she's the one who got the invite. She got a direct invite. She didn't win it in like a lottery or a raffle ticket. Like, she got a personal invite from Scott McKnight. I'd like, you need to be asking if he's interested in me, huh? Leslie laughs it off and says no, that she's not interested in Scott in that way. It's the day of the party. Leslie and Morgan are getting ready, and Leslie's mom walks in, and immediately I don't know why she fucking hates her daughter Leslie, but she just does. Like, everything that comes out of her mouth is always a critique, and it's always like belittling her and whatever physical shit she has going on. So in this instance, Leslie's mom walks in, and instead of being like, oh sweetie, you look beautiful, the first thing she says is like, you need more blush. So she puts more blush on her, and then she presents Leslie's grandmother's earrings. Leslie's mother presents her mother's diamond earrings. So these are iconic diamond earrings, okay? The diamond earrings have a story, right? So Leslie's grandmother was wearing those earrings when she met her husband. Her mom was wearing those earrings when she met Leslie's dad, aka her husband. So they're good luck earrings. And basically, if you put these earrings on, you're getting a man. Of course, Leslie's mom would present these to Leslie, her daughter, right? No, she doesn't. She gives them to goddamn motherfucker. sorry, let me take it down a notch. Leslie's mom gives Morgan the earrings and not Leslie, and you can very clearly see that Leslie's feelings are hurt by this. I don't know, they just played too much in Leslie's face for me. I hated it so much. Now I can kind of see why Leslie didn't admit that she might have had a crush on Scott. Maybe she felt like something was wrong with her and that she didn't have a chance because her mom was always criticizing her and always hyping up Morgan. So like I can see why she would be like, no, I don't want him. Knowing damn well she did want him. So Leslie and Morgan are walking out the door, and Leslie's dad is a total sweetheart. He's like, oh my gosh, you look beautiful. You're gonna find a prince tonight. And he generously lends her his car. So mind you, Leslie's car, Eleanor, is a little rough, okay? And so he is like, every princess needs a carriage, and lets her drive his car because his car is a bit nicer than Eleanor. So tell me why this bitch Morgan fixes her mouth to say, oh, thank God, because I wasn't about to get in that Mustang, referring to Eleanor. I would have been like, bitch, didn't you get your BMW repossessed? You weren't gonna get an Eleanor. What were you gonna get in? You don't have a job. You couldn't pay for a car. Couldn't pay for a ride there. Couldn't afford a taxi there. I say taxi because I don't think Uber was invented by then. I don't think that there was an Uber. I don't think there was a Lyft or anything during this time. 2010? I don't think so. So we're now at Scott McKnight's birthday party, and immediately Morgan separates from Leslie, and she's like, oh, I just want to go look around. So she separates. Leslie goes to the bar, and Scott approaches her. He's telling her that she looks good. They're having conversation. Tell me why Morgan walks up, not even walks up, she looks hurriedly, she looks very anxious. She goes up to Leslie and says, oh, thank God I found you. Like, she's in a full panic, and she's like, we gotta go, like, I have to go, I'm so sorry. There's charity that I'm working for, like, they need me, there's an emergency. Mind you, they've been there, Leslie has barely been able to get a drink. They've been there for literally all of 5 minutes. They haven't been there long at all. So Leslie is like looking confused and then upset when she realizes that Morgan is lying, because Morgan doesn't work for no damn charity. So being that Scott volunteers and Morgan is an attractive young lady, he's like, oh wow, like I volunteer myself, like are y'all leaving already? How can I contact you? And Morgan pretends to barely know him. She's like, Scott, right? Knowing damn well she knows exactly who that is. Like, she was literally just trying to scam her way into his birthday party, and now here she is pretending to barely like know he even exists. So she's like, Scott, right? She's like, I don't date basketball players, and literally pulls Leslie away so they can leave. And this is what pisses me off. And this is where I had to like stop and regroup and then come back and watch, because I'm like, bitch, imagine you get invited to a party like that. I don't know how often you get invited to mansion parties, okay? I've been invited this many times. It's a zero. That's none. Never. I've never been to a mansion party before. And if I go with somebody that's pulling a stunt, a fake emergency for a charity that they don't even work for, huh? This is insane. And it's like, if she was gonna pull a stunt like that, I would be like, bitch, let me know before we go so we can at least take separate cars. This is ridiculous. One thing, inviting your hot homegirl out, and you know, men are flocking to her as they should be because she's bad and has a heart of gold. And then it's another thing inviting your hot homegirl out and then she does this shit. That dare I say, I would have probably aired it out. I would have like, she doesn't have a chair, she doesn't work for a charity, she's unemployed, she doesn't work for money, let alone for free. I'm like, you show him your dream board? I would have turned on her so quickly. As Leslie and Morgan are leaving the party, Morgan is like revealing her plan. She's like, this is probably the first time a woman has rejected him since he's gone into the NBA. You said he was different. I wanted to be different. So now he thinks I'm different. And trust me, he's going to find me. I don't even need to give him my number. And so her plan is in motion. The next morning, Leslie is leaving for work and Scott pulls up. And he pulls up looking for Morgan. It worked. Her plan actually worked. Which him finding out where they live is a bit much. She asked him, she's like, how did you find out where I live? He was like, oh, I know people. I would have been like, that didn't answer my fucking question. How the fuck do you know where I live? But nonetheless, they brushed past it like nothing. What would have been funny is if instead he called the charity that Morgan claimed that she worked for to get her contact information, only to find out that she doesn't exist in their database because she's a liar. Huh? So Leslie calls Morgan down, and Morgan looks out the window and sees that there's a nice car. She's like, oh my God, Scott has found me. So she's putting on her makeup. She's like putting on nice clothes, doing her hair and stuff, runs downstairs, and she's like, what are you doing here? So then Scott is asking her out to dinner. She's continuing trying to curve him, and it's like, oh, I've done this before. And he's like, you haven't done this before with me, like, I'm a gentleman, ask Leslie. And so she agrees, and then they literally start dating. Like, it worked. It actually worked. What she should have done was become a project manager, because she did research, she executed a plan, and then did it successfully. So 3 months go by, and during these 3 months, Morgan has moved in with Scott. She's attending his basketball games. She's in magazines with him. And all the while, Leslie is seeing all of this and is genuinely happy for her god sister. Morgan and Scott have a party. Leslie attends said party, and she's able to catch up with Morgan a bit. And Morgan is talking about how she's fallen in love with Scott. And Leslie is hesitant to believe this, because apparently Morgan has a history of, like, not going through men, but she just kind of uses them. And Morgan is saying how Scott has changed her and how she's a better person because of him. And then you're like, okay, it's like the intention started off bad, but maybe there's some good that came out of it, and maybe that was the push she needed to become a better person. That's not what happens. At the party, Scott is thanking everybody for coming, and basically he proposes to Morgan. Of course, Morgan accepts, and so now they're engaged. Of course, Leslie is happy for her, and she's supportive, and everything's going good. Now we're at one of Scott's games, and Scott injures himself pretty badly, where he's not getting back up. Like, he fucks his knee up pretty bad, and commentators and critics are like, this is not a good sign. And he ends up going to the hospital, and they said if he doesn't heal in enough time to make the playoffs, his career could be over. So of course they hired the best physical therapist that they could find. She's like a miracle worker is what they call her. So Morgan finds the trainer attractive and basically has her fired, and asks Leslie to fill in, because like I said, Leslie is the chief physical therapist at her job. And so basically Morgan has Leslie take over. So Leslie takes off of work, and now she is a full-time lived-in physical therapist for Scott. As Leslie is training with Scott, Morgan is MIA majority of the time. She's out shopping, she's out doing anything just to avoid being with Scott. She's like kind of annoyed that he doesn't want to hang out and have fun. Mind you, he's like injured and his career is on the line. And it doesn't help either that it's rumored that the Nets aren't going to be reinstating their contract with Scott. So it's like, it's just too much happening at once. One morning, Scott wakes up and he sees that Morgan has left her engagement ring and a letter basically breaking up with him. She doesn't even break up with him in person, just she does it via a letter. And mind you, Morgan gave Leslie no heads up. So Leslie gets blindsided by Scott's mom, who's obviously upset about the situation, because like she just like, you know, Morgan left him during a very vulnerable time. And so that being her god sister, you know, you would think that she would be aware, had some sort of involvement, but she genuinely just did not know. So Leslie goes back to her house to confront Morgan. She's basically getting on Morgan like, why would you do this? Why didn't you tell me you were gonna do this? And just basically pushing her for answers, like, why would you do this? Morgan says that she wants to be somebody, and she's not gonna be somebody if she's with a has-been basketball player with a shitty contract. Isn't that fucked up? If you're gonna run game on somebody, at least run game on somebody that's playing the game. Like, I know that there had to have been other players, other NBA players that solely want an arm candy on their arm and is willing to have that type of interaction. Like, I know that there are wealthy men that are just like, you're just here to look good, I'll provide the funds. Like, I've seen dynamics like this. I know it exists, and I feel like she would have been better off in a situation like that. But it just sucks because Scott was actually just like a genuinely nice guy. And like, you can't do that. That's so crazy. You especially can't do that with men. I know men till this day that have had their heart broken in like college or in high school, and they've been in their villain era ever since. And it's like, damn girl, don't fuck up a good one. Get one that's already fucked up. Do that shit to somebody that's already So Scott is defeated. He's in a really dark place. He's given up at this point. And it's like, if you think about it, he was under the impression that he had a genuine relationship with Morgan. And so Morgan knows that she's playing a game. We know that Morgan is playing a game, and we know what her intentions were, but he doesn't know. So it's just like especially sad. Like, he genuinely wanted to marry her. Like, he loved her, you know, his career, his passion, his fiance, all of it compromised. So I imagine that that's like a very a very unfun headspace to be in. And so Leslie ends up tough loving him. Like, she forces him out of bed and takes him to his childhood basketball court. And she's doing this to give him some sort of inspiration and perspective. And they're watching the kids play, and she's talking about how, you know, there's so many talented kids out there that are never going to make it to the NBA, and how he's made it and he's reached his goal and he's living his dream. And it's basically saying, like, you know, he has a hiccup, but he needs to like push through this point to be able to continue out his career. And so it works. In a full training montage, we have 8 weeks for him to get healed so he can make it to the playoffs. Throughout the montage, Scott is getting stronger, he's getting faster, he's getting better. Like, he went from crutches to running. Like, he's, you know, he has some motion. And all the while, Scott and Leslie are vibing. They're bonding, they're kikiing. Okay, I think we know where this is going. Like I said, they're bonding, they're vibing, and we get some lore on Eleanor. So as I mentioned, Eleanor is Leslie's car. So before Leslie's grandfather passed, he gave her Eleanor. So Eleanor has a dent on the driver's door. Leslie likes to keep the dent there because her grandfather had a dimple on his left cheek, which is so cute, very adorable concept there. And so that's why the door is messed up. And she says that any time that she's gone to somebody to get it fixed, they said that they have to get rid of the dent, but she doesn't want to because, you know, she wants to pay homage to her grandfather. So just keep that in mind. So at some point, Leslie gets a cold, and we get to see my 2 favorite love languages played out between Scott and Leslie. So first off, Scott makes her some soup, and Leslie's like, oh, I could have done that. And he's like, I know, I'm going to take care of you. And I thought that was so sweet. One time I was on a date, and this guy asked me what I look for in a man. And I said, you know, a man that wants to take care of me. And he said it was a red flag because he thought I was talking about finances. But I was like, no, I can do that. I'm talking about shit like this. I think it's such a privilege and such a beautiful thing to be able to care for your partner when they're down, and for your partner to be able to care for you when you're down. And Scott is feeding her soup, which we can't get too excited about that because the last man that fed Leslie said he just wanted to be friends, so we won't get too excited about that. It's still cute though. Scott doubles on some quality time. Like, Leslie's laid out on the couch, he puts on a movie, lays with her, and I thought that was so sweet. Like, he's just there chilling with her. He could have given her her soup and then just been like, all right, peace, my leg feels better, I'm gonna go play some basketball. He sat there and laid with her, and I thought that that was so sweet. And then they both end up falling asleep. At some point he wakes up and like tucks her in and then goes on about his business. At some point Leslie is feeling better. The time zone, or like the time, I don't know if she just had like a 1-day flu or a 2-day flu, but she's feeling better. It's like 3 a.m. and Leslie has like a little, you know, a midnight snack, a 3 a.m. snack, I don't know what you want to call it. So she has like her little snack, she has like a little tray of cookies, and she's going back to her room, and she hears piano playing from Scott's secret room. They referenced the secret room earlier in the movie, and now we get to find out what is in the room. So she goes in the room, and Scott is in there playing the piano. Then you abruptly remember that Scott is being played by Common. So anyway, she goes in there and he's playing the piano, she's singing along, they're laughing, having a good time or whatever. And Scott confides in Leslie, saying that he's a little nervous about the playoffs, which is like that night. Basically saying that he's anxious, he's worried that his knee is gonna fail, he's worried that he's not gonna do good, that he's gonna lose his career. And she basically gives him some words of encouragement. He's feeling better, and he notices her little midnight snack. And so she encourages him to try one. It's like a chocolate chip, it's like chocolate chip cookies with marshmallow. And so he tries it, he likes it. And then like, so he reaches for another one of her cookies. And then she has her tray of cookies and she's like, no. And so like he's reaching over her, and like there's this moment where it looks like they're about to kiss. And I was like, ah! So we're at the playoffs, and Scott has a really rough start. Like, it's not looking too good. He's not as fast. You can tell he's very scared about using his knee. So the ref calls for a timeout, and he's on the sideline. Leslie goes to him and basically gives him a pep talk. The pep talk works because he goes back into the game, and now he's dunking, he's shooting, he's scoring. He makes the winning shot. So to celebrate and to thank Leslie for her help in healing him, he takes her out to dinner. They go to a jazz spot, which, you know, is like something that they have in common, and it's a very intimate setting. It looks very romantic if you ask me. I don't know. He gets Terrence Blanchard to play. I'm not familiar with who that is, but based off of Leslie's reaction, I imagine if I were to go on a date and Brent Faiyaz were to pull up on the scene. That was what her reaction was giving. I think it's like, you know, somebody really popular in the jazz community. And ironically enough, you know, I played the saxophone in middle school. Don't know nothing about no jazz. So anyways, it's romantic, it's a good time, and so they go back to Scott's house where he has another surprise for Leslie. He has given Eleanor a complete makeover. She has a new paint job, he's done the interior up, she has a sunroof, and it's really, really nice. And he even was able to get the door fixed without having the dent removed, and so now she has butterfly doors on her car. And this is like a very thoughtful gift, and I feel like it's even better than buying her a new car, because it's like he listened to her story about the car and her wanting to keep like the dimple or the dent in the car, and I feel like it was a very meaningful gift, because he could have easily just bought her a new car, but he got her a gift that was very specific to her, and I thought that was so sweet. And so to thank Scott, she like is like super grateful. She gives him like a little peck on the lips. And there's like a moment where they pause, and then he goes in for another kiss, and then like deepens the kiss, and now they're kissing. Now they're inside the house, and we don't get much of like an intimate scene, if you know what I mean. But we're putting pieces together. We could fairly say that that's what went down. Their clothes are at the foot of the bed. They're all naked in bed, wrapped up in the sheets. The sheets are disheveled. Like clearly there was some action going on. They're looking at each other lovingly. And I don't want to be that guy, but I couldn't help but notice as the camera was panning away from the bed and off to the side of the bed that there were like 16 candles lit, which I don't know. When did he have time to do that? When did they come in immediately and just like, oh, we're gonna get down to business as soon as we get these candles lit, all 16 of these pillar candles lit. Like, how did that even work? Did she go to the bathroom and come back out and then discover that he's a fucking firebender and was able to miraculously light 16 pillar candles in an insane amount of time? I don't know, but I digress. So the next morning, Leslie wakes up and Scott is gone, but he's left her a cute little note and a breakfast tray with a champagne, possibly a mimosa, and breakfast on the bed. Leslie must be a gentle sleeper because that shit was still on the bed. If that was me, all of that would have been knocked over, possibly on the floor. I toss and turn when I sleep. I'm what they call a Tina Toss and Turner. Rolling off the bed. That was stupid. I'm gonna stop. Leslie's taking her cute little breakfast tray downstairs and she hears a knock at the door. And y'all, it's literally Morgan. It's literally Morgan. She wants to speak to Scott, and Leslie lets her in, which could not have been me. I would have answered the door and been like, "You're too late, wench. On last night's full moon, Scott and I performed the 16 candle mating ritual. He's mine, bitch. He's mine." But she doesn't. Instead, she just lets Morgan right in. Oh my god, it's extremely awkward. And eventually Scott walks in, and now it's even more awkward, and Leslie kind of like walks away to let them talk, and Morgan is like, "Let me explain myself." And Morgan goes into this whole thing about how she was abandoned as a child, how her mom passed at a young age and her father left her shortly after, and she's basically saying she has abandonment issues. She's afraid that Scott was going to leave her. So Scott is like, "I would have never left you." And mind you, Leslie didn't go far. She's listening to all of this. As soon as she hears that, she leaves the room and she's like done and she's over it. I do feel like what Morgan was saying had some truth to it. Like, I think her upbringing may have had something to do with how she is as a person now. However, that still does not excuse her for doing some of the shit that she did. So Morgan asks for another chance, and Scott tells her that he needs to think about it. And so then he immediately goes to check on Leslie. And at this point, Leslie is packing. For some reason, Scott doesn't understand why she's so upset about the situation. And he like goes on to explain that not a long time ago that he was planning on marrying Morgan, because like I said, he has no fucking clue how conniving Morgan actually was. So in his mind, like, you know, those feelings didn't just disappear. And I understand that, but I wish he used some sort of context clues to understand what was going on, because it's like, okay, she got with you while you were successful. She left you the second you weren't successful and that your career was, you know, on the line, and then got back with you literally the next day and is trying to get back with you the next day following your recovery and your success. Like, I'm like, I get his thought process, but I'm like, lock in. I'm like, lock in a little bit, please. And he also goes to say that he didn't want to hurt Leslie and how she's a special friend, which I can't be convinced that he's not partially in his villain era at this point, because how is he handling this so casually? Because, like, I don't know, and maybe, like, for some people, sex is just, like, a casual ass thing, but it's like you literally slept with Leslie and now you're basically retracting that, which you can't retract that, it's happened, to try to figure out your shit with Morgan. And I understand he got little to no closure with Morgan, and I would rather have him communicated it that way instead of being like, oh, you're a special friend, like, you're a good friend of mine, and I was in love with Morgan, and I don't know, it's just kind of weird. So Leslie goes back home, she goes back to her job. Ultimately, she decides she wants to combine her passion for basketball and her career and become a trainer for the NBA. And at some point during her time with Scott, he does briefly mention this, and so I do think that it's great that she took a positive out of that dynamic that she had with him, because if she didn't get a man out of the situation, she was able to see her capabilities as a physical therapist and how good she actually is at her job. Like I said, Scott's injury could have been a career-ending injury, and so by her being able to heal him and get him back on the court, so it was very easy for her to put that on her resume. She's getting all sorts of calls from different NBA teams asking her to become their team's trainer. She even gets a call from the Nets, her favorite team, but she declines because of the situation between her and Scott. Because, you know, that would be kind of awkward if, like, you go into work and you see the guy who ripped your heart out. Like, that would suck. She considers training for the 76ers or the Sixers, which would require her to move cities. So Leslie's mom is confused by this because she's like, you're willing to leave. Because if she works for the Nets, she doesn't have to leave, and she gets to work for her all-time favorite team. So her mom is having a hard time understanding why she would want to leave at all. Leslie's mom quickly comes to the conclusion that Leslie has fallen in love with Scott. Leslie's mom, a bit of an asshole, is like, basically starts to say something on the lines of, that kind of man wouldn't end up with you. And I fucking hate that people project their insecurities onto other people and their relationships. Like, I see it too many times on social media where there's maybe one conventionally attractive person and the person that they're with may not be conventionally attractive. And when I say conventionally attractive, I guess I mean attractive by a widespread, like a variety of people, a large variety of people. If the person is happy with who they're with, I feel like that's nobody else's business. Like, I feel like that should just be the end all be all. But it's like, no, you see people all the time like, oh, I just know she's with him for his money. And oh, how did she get him? And I'm like, are y'all okay? While this is happening, Scott and Morgan are dating again, and Morgan is like really rushing to try to get married. Mind you, Miss Ma'am disappeared for 3 months, gave back her wedding ring, and now that he's recovered, she wants to rush and like hurry up and get married. And so he's hesitant with this, of course, because they just started back talking. And so Scott tells her that it's too much too fast and that they need to slow down and kind of figure things out as they go. And so Scott has an interview. It's a live interview, and the interviewer is asking about Scott's recovery, and Scott gives all credit to Leslie, and he's basically praising Leslie and praising her a little bit too much, if you know what I mean, to the point where Morgan realizes Scott is in love with Leslie. Leslie's mom is watching live at home and realizes that Scott is in love with Leslie. Mid-interview, as Scott is praising Leslie, he realized that he's in love with Leslie. And so he stops the interview and tries to run to go find her. But then Morgan stops him. So as the audience, we think that Morgan is about to stop Scott and be like, oh, no. But instead, she's like, no, like, she's in Philadelphia. Like, that's where you'll find her. And which I think was super dope, that she wasn't a complete mean girl and wasn't like, you're leaving me for her? Instead, she was like, you know, this is where you can find her. She's like, I understand, which I thought was kind of cool. So Leslie is just finishing up her tour at the Sixers facility, and as she's leaving, Scott is out there waiting for her, and he's professing his love for her, and he's there to risk it all. He's talking about quitting with the Nets, and he just wants to be with her. Whatever he has to do, he's like, I'm not leaving here without you, basically. So Leslie is upset and she's under the impression that Scott has found out that Morgan is a fake, a fraud, a phony, but he actually hadn't come to that conclusion himself yet. Leslie thinks that she is his plan B because things didn't work out with Morgan, but he explains that that's not what happened and that they didn't end badly. He just loves Leslie and just wants to be with Leslie. He goes on to say that Leslie is just right for him. He literally says that. He says that she's just right. He said the name of the movie in the movie. I thought that was kind of fun. So on the spot, Leslie calls the Nets manager, the Nets team, and tells her that she's going to take the job with them. They make up and then they leave. So the next basketball season, Leslie and Morgan are together watching one of Scott's games, which I don't know, okay? I don't know if I have that level of maturity to do that. I'll reflect on that in my free time. But anyways, Leslie and Scott are married at this point. She's working for the Nets and it's happily ever after. But yes, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope your week is going well. I hope your month is going well. And I'll see you later. Bye.